So it's 2022 already, and I thought I'd do a very quick video to talk about some of my favourite sculptors and creators that you can subscribe to, and some of the reasons why you might want to check them out depending on what sort of thing you're doing with your hobby, especially when it comes to 3D printing. So let's get on with it. So I've been 3D printing now for about 5 or 6 months, I think it is. It's absolutely flown by. And in that time, I've kind of dipped my toes in and out of a few different, Patreon subscribers, tried out different types of models. And there are a few that are definitely at the top of my list in terms of preference and what I always go to. And there's a few that I've tried out and they'd definitely be perfect if I was into, more Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. So I'm going to kind of cover those off. Now, the first one is, if you're into your Dungeons & Dragons, I honestly do not think you can go wrong with either Loot Studios or Arc Villain Games. Now, I tried these ones out when I first got into 3D printing, and the thing that I absolutely adore about them is they give you a set of different miniatures, and then they also give you a storyline to go along with those as well. So if you are after doing like a one-shot adventure with your D&D party or anything like that, you get all things like your stat blocks, and you also get the adventure to go with it, and it just gives you something to do with those models, which just makes it pretty much damned awesome. With Loot Studios, you get a really cool welcome pack as well, so you get all the stuff like your inn and your tavern and your barkeep and stuff like that, so that way you can really bring your world and story to life. And I had an absolute blast printing some of those off and just painting those up. Now, when it comes to things like Arc Villain Games, you cannot go wrong with some of their models. They look absolutely superb, and the detail is just absolutely top notch. They look kind of like ultra realistic a lot of the time, and I printed off some of their demon set and they look awesome, like really, really awesome. Now, the one thing that kind of puts me off is I've got a smaller printer, so I have the Mars Pro. So when it comes to Arc Villain Games, they do right the range from like your kind of 28mm model and your smaller miniatures right through to like 250mm models. So you get some absolute behemoths when it comes to Arc Villain Games. They look awesome, but I just don't have a printer that supports that at the moment, and I'm not really fancying chopping them all up. So if you're a dungeon master and you're after something that's really going to give you some of the extra campaigns and stuff like that, my personal suggestion would either be go for Arc Villain Games or Loot Studios. I'd probably lean a little bit more towards Arc Villain Games just because some of their sculpts look absolutely damned fantastic, and you can use them in other armies and stuff like that, but you can't really go wrong with either. Personally, for me, I'm more into kind of creating armies and putting all of that together. I don't know why, I just get a bit addicted to that. So I had a bit of a look around and moved away from Arc Villain Games and Loot Studios. I used them for a couple of months, really enjoyed them, but I wasn't doing too much in terms of Dungeons & Dragons. So putting together my armies, I found one called Highlands Miniatures, and I'm still subscribed to these, and they're absolutely one of my favourites. If you're into old school, sort of like Warhammer Fantasy, and you've collected Bretonnian Knights and Empire and stuff like that, they are pretty much the go-to ones, in my opinion at least, out of all the different sculpts I've seen and played with. They create loads of different regiments and loads of different unit sets, and the great thing is they kind of stick to, just a couple of types of armies, and each month they bring in new sort of expansions for those armies. So currently I've been printing off a whole load of different knights that are going to fit in with that Empire theme. They've got these little Griffin knights as well, all sorts of different cavalry. If you're into your Bretonnian knights, then also they've got a whole load of those. And then on the flip side of that, they've also got your undead stuff. So they've done loads of different vampires, skeleton hordes, and there's just loads of stuff that can expand those two different types of armies, and they're just such a good blast to paint. They come pre-supported, so it's relatively easy to get them all onto your build plate, get them off, and they clean up really nicely as well. There's a few little areas where you do lose some details because they are a little bit finer than some other models that you can get, especially if they're of a more heroic scale like Artisan Guild, which we'll come on to. But yeah, I cannot fault them. I really, really enjoy them. Printing them off is really easy. I get a couple of failures here and there, but for the most part, the supports are done really well. They come off and they fit so nicely with all the different types of armies. So if you're an army collector and you're kind of going for that Warhammer style of things, I really, really suggest trying out Highlands Miniatures. I've had a blast with them and they're one of my favourites. The final one I'm going to come on to, and this one is my absolute favourite for a couple of reasons, is Artisan Guild. I just really like the scale. They go for this sort of 32mm heroic scale. The features are a little bit enlarged, but each month you get a different set, and it's like I suppose an army, so you can build out your armies if you want to. But it always kind of puts me through my paces because they bring out different things that I can try. So last month was Barbarians, and I'm going to have a video coming for that as well, so make sure you subscribe and come along for that. And it kind of pushed me because I don't normally paint things with skin, or much skin, because I'm just not very good at it. But it made me try different things out, and I really, really enjoyed it. So with Artisan Guild, each month you get a different set, and it's a themed army. So like I said, last month was Barbarians. You get sort of like your just standard ground units, which are pretty cool, and they're also modular as well, so you can change up all the different weapons, the hands. They normally come in either helmeted or non-helmeted as well, so if you want to be able to paint your hair and your faces and stuff like that, you can print those ones off. They have a couple of sort of like command units, and they also have the cavalry units, but then they have like a big beastie unit. So I printed off this undead vampire lord from one of their sets. It looks absolutely awesome on this demon bat. Now, one of the great things about these is, like I said, they're just easy to paint. They come pre-supported. They're relatively large as well, so I guess they're almost like a Warcraft type of scale if you think about it that way, and some, I guess, the old Warhammer orcs from fantasy and stuff like that, just with enlarged hands and faces, but they look really, really fun. They're a hell of a lot of fun to paint. They're relatively easy to paint as well, because I'm not a great painter, but getting these things looking at least half decent is pretty easy to do. They also come with different themed bases as well, so if you do want to print your bases off, then you can do that, which again is great fun. And they normally have some kind of like scenery that comes with them. I know in January's set there's more scenery that seems to be coming with them, so they seem to expanding that way, which is really interesting too. Honestly, Artisan Guild for me are my favourite just because each month is quite different and varied. They give you enough, so you get like your standard like set of infantry which you can mix up and print them off, and they're all different modular units. They give you your cavalry, a large unit, and also your command unit. And the great thing is all of like your cavalry and stuff is interchangeable, so if you want to kind of put your knights from one set onto some like saber-toothed tigers from like last month's set, then you can do that as well. So you can mix things up if you want to. It also, for me, it gets me into painting different types of units. So beforehand, like I said, I wouldn't have touched anything with that much flesh on show just because I'm not particularly good at it, but last month it really got me doing that. So Artisan Guild for me are my absolute favourite ones. There's enough in there to start building out some armies, they're large enough and varied units, and they're always really interesting sculpts, so I've had an absolute blast with them. So there's some of my top picks for different categories for 2021. I've had an absolute blast with 3D printing, and if you've got any recommendations that I should try out and maybe review some of the units and sets and stuff like that, let me know in the comments. I'd be really interested to know what you guys are printing and what you guys are painting. Hope you've enjoyed that video, just kind of a quick one to go over some of the different sculpts and creators and Patreons and stuff like that I've tried out during my 3D printing time that have really stood out to me and made an impression. As always, if you could hit that like and subscribe button, massively appreciate it. It just helps the channel to grow, and I'll be back in the future with some more 3D printing content. Bye!